In this video, we're going to introduce the topic of pivot tables. We're going to talk about what they are, basically how they work, and how data needs to be organized for pivot tables to shine. In this example, we have a data set of sales for different product lines of vehicles. You can see here, you can see we have the sales value. We're going to assume that's in dollars. We have the quantity ordered for each sale. For each order, we get an order number. We also have what the product line is called, the different kinds of items we're selling. Customer names imply that these sales are not actually real motorcycles or real classic cars. They're probably souvenirs or miniatures or other such things. We can also see we have a lot of information about each of the customers. We know what countries they're from. These are international sales. And that kind of is a good data set, very long, over 1,000 rows. We have a fair amount of data here. This would be difficult data to analyze without using pivot tables. You could do it, obviously, but for instance, if we wanted to know all the sales that went to motorcycle, we'd have to filter by motorcycle and sum this column, but we can really quickly get that information and a lot of other information from a pivot table. So to make a pivot table, first I need to select the area of data that we're going to be looking at, which is this whole table. So I'm going to click on A2, hold down Shift and Control, go right directional button, down directional button, and that will select the whole area of this table. I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. Now I could just hit OK and it would make a pivot table, but I want to define where the pivot table will be. This is a useful thing to know. Sometimes you want to have one tab with all your pivot tables on it to keep things organized, so knowing how to do this is helpful. Click on the existing worksheet, click here, and then go to, I already created a tab for this. This is where my pivot table is going to live. Go to B2, and that defines well enough where it lives. I hit OK, and there we go. We have our pivot table. And this is kind of a weird looking thing, but you can see we have our pivot table fields. These are our options of how to control the pivot table. If I click away, they disappear. All I have to do is click back on here, and there they are again. And you can see how this is organized. We have filters, columns, rows, and values. So the first thing we want to do is look at product lines. The product lines were the motorcycles, the classic cars. We want to know trucks and buses. We want to know what's the most popular, the total sales for each product line. Very simple thing. We could do it manually, but we're going to do it in a few seconds with a pivot table. So I'm going to look for product lines. I'm going to just type that here, and there it is. I'm going to drag that to rows, and there you go. I have all the rows as the product lines. Now this feature alone of just presenting the unique values in a column is actually super helpful, and I've used it in more complicated models that aren't pivot table oriented, but also use a pivot table on the back end just to produce quickly a unique list of items. So this alone is a useful feature, but we want to do a little more today. We want to look at the sales for the product lines. So I'm going to go to sales and drag it to value. Now it's going to, in the value area, sum the sales. I could make it do other things like count the sales or look at an average of the sales, other things like that, but we're going to do sum, and we can just easily sort this by just clicking on data and clicking Z to A, or by right clicking and sorting largest to smallest. And you can see classic cars is number one. The last one is trains, least popular is trains, and that just quickly showed us what was the most popular product line. We can also add columns to further dimensionalize our data set. So let's say we wanted to look at what's the most and least popular product line in different regions of the world. So if I were to go to the bottom of this list and look at territories, I can drag territory to column, and there you go. I have Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, I got Japan, and North America. And I can actually individually sort these, right? I can see, oh, ships is the least popular in Asia Pacific America. Asia Pacific. And in Japan, I can see that trains is the least popular, planes is number 2. I can kind of analyze and look at the different variables here. What I could also do instead of, what I could also do is look at add a filter to this data set. That's what this fourth area is for. So if you look at the original data set, the deals are kind of broken up by size, small, medium, and large. Let's say I only wanted to look at large deals. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to put deal size in the filter. Now you notice that it moved it down a little bit because the pivot table needed a little bit of room. If you're going to add a lot of filters, a lot of times I'll add a few rows on top just so that there's lots of room for me to make all my different filters. So for deal size, let's filter it by large deals just to see where all those are. And we can see basically some information here about what are the larger and smaller deals. So this allows us to filter. Let's see what the small deals look like. So you can see that's different, and you can see the change in size. All the different product lines are represented there, but only the large ones. For large ones, some of the product lines are not represented among the larger deal sizes. So you can imagine how very, very useful this is. You can quickly analyze data, figure out, answer a lot of really important questions about data without a whole lot of work. And there are many formula-based approaches to getting all these answers, which we'll actually talk about in other videos. But this is a really useful feature to know because in many cases, I will prefer to use pivot tables even though I know how to do something with formulas, because pivot tables are essentially a syndicated tool within Excel. And by using that kind of a tool, we're reducing the possibilities of errors or mistakes or issues or other things like that. So this kind of pivot tables have a really great way that they behave in many cases, and they have some issues as well, but we're going to talk about all that in future videos. One thing I want to talk about before we draw this video to a close is just talk about how data needs to be organized for pivot tables to prosper and be good for you and be a good option. So I just want to show you here an example. Now this is a crosstab essentially. We got years, we got the regions, we got merged cells. This is a terrible format for pivot tables. Pivot tables can make this. Point of fact, I made this with a pivot table, but pivot tables aren't good at parsing data in this kind of a format. Pivot tables want everything to be in rows essentially. So you got, or rather, these to be in very simple columns with lots of rows and the values to be a single column. Just to show you what I mean, this exact data is presented down here. And you can see the difference. We got year ID, territory, product line, sales, quantity ordered. Very simple, very clean. This is sometimes referred to as a flat data format. It's very straightforward. Pivot tables know exactly what to do with this data set. They do not know what to do with this data set. So keep that in mind. I've been in projects where I had to actually reorganize data like this to look like this in order to keep everything together and actually allow me to use pivot tables as my option. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to the rest of the videos in this series where we'll talk about all the other things you can do with pivot tables.